The other little conversation that I want to have today is I've been thinking a lot about the idea of what trauma-informed care, trauma-informed practice is. And I've been thinking about how we can take this idea and apply it to how we interact with ourselves and other people, like as a lens to understand our stories and the ways that we act. And as always, right, with the goal of understanding our money or the ways that we're interacting with money better, being kinder to ourselves, and understanding the tools that we do have. So here's just like a little bit about that, right? And this all stems out of a conversation that I was having with a client a week or two ago. We had this long, great conversation about trauma-informed relationships. So I think this will be interesting. And the way where I started thinking about it was that money is kind of always a proxy, right? Money just represents something else that we could get. And when we back up, money often ends up being a proxy for survival, right? I can get the food I need. For security or safety, right? I can have housing. I can get to work, right? Or for care or love, right? We often show care and love with money, for better or for worse, right? And it's a proxy for getting our needs met, right? Going to the dentist, getting health and wellness care, things like that. Sending our kids to school, et cetera, right? So, casual, no big deal, just these core things that we think about. But because money is a proxy, it means that we end up putting the power of that thing we want, right? That thing like safety or care or getting our needs met into the proxy, which means that we end up making things about money that are actually not at all about money. And to me, this is one of the underlying reasons why talking about money is so interesting to me, because we're sometimes talking nuts and bolts about money, and sometimes we're not talking about money at the end of the day. We're talking about the things money is a proxy for, these longer term things, these deeper and bigger things. So a couple examples that I just thought of quickly of like when we are making other things about money is like if you've ever been fired for a job, and so I know I have, and you think, oh my God, I'm going to starve. How am I going to, like all these, your like worry for survival starts coming up, even if it's not actually instantly going to happen, right? Or like say that you got stolen from, right? Somebody like steals your wallet or steals your credit card online, right? And you think, oh my God, I messed up somehow, right? You kind of put it on yourself really quickly. Or if you need support, right? And sometimes that support can look like money. Sometimes people will think, oh my God, I'm not doing my part. Like it instantly becomes self-judgment. And when I think about these things and the sort of common reactions that I hear people tell me about, again, I talk to people about money all week, every week for a bunch of years now. I hear a lot of people come to me in conversation with the idea that they're doing it wrong. And this really, really stands out to me. The more I hear it, the more I like really start to wonder, like, gosh, like why do so many people think like, oh, I must be doing this wrong. I must not have the information. I can't be doing this right. And I think part of it is that we're sort of fed information from the world around us on how we're doing our money. And that tends to make us think that we're doing it wrong, that there must be something that isn't right with me, very individualizing the problem. I'm not doing it right. I could have done something different. I messed up. I'm not this. I'm not that. Right. And it leads us to think that like, maybe it's like, well, I don't have enough because I did it wrong, or whatever I have, I'm not using it right, or I have resources, but I'm not sharing it in the right way. Right. And something I've observed is that, like, across all kinds of people, no matter how much money you do have or you don't have, at some point, it's very likely that you've worried that you're doing it wrong. And it just really stands out to me. Folks with much money in their bank accounts, folks with negative money, all, and everybody in between. I've had conversations with people worried that they're not doing their money right. And it stands out to me that that is a sign that it's not actually an individual problem, right? Like, how is it possible that we're all doing it wrong? And so the way that I've been thinking about it is that we're led individually to compare ourselves to others, right? And that's, I think, it's a function of the economic system that we're in. Like, Mark brought in the Joneses earlier, right? So we're like, okay, well, like, what's somebody else doing? How's somebody else doing their money? Are they doing better than me, right? But really, it's like collectively, a lot of us are worried about the same things, right? We're like, okay, well, and at all different levels of the resources or money that we have. And one thing that I notice and that I worry about is that if we're all doing it wrong and we're all worried about doing it wrong and we're all stressing, this worry, it leads to unnecessary and extra output that we might not need to be putting out. And I'm always trying to figure out ways to, like, turn down all of our emotional responses and turn down excess energy so that we can put energy to our families, our partners, our friends, our artistic interests, our communities, right? Like our volunteer work. So again, when everyone's worried, like, if we're all thinking we're all doing it wrong, then we're also collectively, like, putting out unnecessary extra stress, time spent solving problems that actually aren't really problems, right? So just time kind of wasted, and sitting in, like, self-doubt and judgment and shame about worrying that we're doing something wrong because we don't talk about money and don't know what other people are doing, and aren't aware, very intentionally are kept unaware that other people are having the exact same thinking and worries and concerns. So this kind of, like, led me to think, okay, well, like, what would a trauma-informed model change? And I'm going to define for all of us what a trauma-informed model is because I want to define my terms. That's kind, right? So, like, trauma-informed practices are strengths-based. So that means we're looking at, like, what tools and skills are already there in place. They respond to the impact of trauma, right? And a trauma is just an experience that has to deal with our, like, core senses of, like, security, safety, and order of the world, kind of like how money is a proxy for our core needs around security, safety, and getting the things we need, right? So it's a strengths-based framework. It's responsive to the impacts of trauma, but it emphasizes physical, psychological, and emotional safety, which I think is really interesting, right? Emphasizes how things can be safe, right? Cool to do. And I bolded this part, and it creates opportunities for survivors of trauma to rebuild a sense of control and empowerment. And I think this is super interesting, the strengths-based part and the opportunities to rebuild a sense of control and empowerment. And if we just try on the idea for a minute that, like, our experience as people who are in a economic system that none of us pick. We just all get born into the socioeconomic place that we're in, the country that we're in, and then we go ahead and we, like, absolutely make choices in our lives that, impact and affect, like, what the, other aspects of our socioeconomic worlds. But at the same time, random things happen, good things happen, bad things happen. If we put on the possibility that we are all having slightly trauma-informed responses to money and economics, and we're just kind of like alone and worrying that it's just us and thinking that like we're doing something wrong, then of course we're going to end up doing our best, but reacting in ways that are kind of that are themselves how we react when we have trauma, right? And what would it look like instead if we were like thinking, okay, money and how people are relating to money and our economic system is or can be traumatic for people. What does it look like if we start to build responses that are about opportunities to get a sense of control and empowerment, right? Because we often don't have a sense of control and empowerment when it comes to economics and money and finances, right? That is one of the big problems, is it feels that we don't have a lot of control, or we only have control in tiny little places. So I want to dig into this a little more, and then I want to chat about this. So if we start potentially just trying on this idea of a trauma-informed practice, right? We might just start to like assume and let it be normal that many people have had hard experiences of all different kinds, right? Doesn't have to be drastic to be a hard experience. That there are totally normal reactions to those experiences, right? And that none of those experiences are anything to be ashamed of or silent about, right? And I think about the leadership that's happening in terms of talking about mental health, right? And talking about like, hey, look, there's all kinds of mental health experiences that people have, right? And there's all sorts of different ways that people will react to their mental health. And that's just how human bodies and brains are in this particular place and time and climate, right? There's a lot of things going on that we're reacting to. Like there's nothing wrong with that. That's just what's happening. So a couple examples that I thought of if we were to like try to understand either our experiences or other people's experiences using like a trauma-informed lens, is that like for some people experiencing scarcity might lead to money hoarding, right? Like kind of trying to keep that security. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. We're just trying to understand, right? For other people, scarcity might lead to spendiness. Like, hey, I got it now, better use it. For some people, the experience of abundance can lead to confusion. Well, what do I do with all this? No one's telling me what to do with this. I'm just getting it. Right? Some other experiences might be if you get mixed messages about either the amount of money you can have or might get to have, or if your family is like not super clear, you know, okay, like we have a lot of money, oh no we don't, and you have the experience of being on a seesaw, it could lead to shutting down, right? This is not an exhaustive list. This is just a couple of things that came to mind. And if we're using the idea of trauma-informed practice, I really love this idea of it being strengths-based, right? Like, okay, like looking at what skills we all already have to kind of like confront this, I'm not doing it right, right? I just can't with that. Because it's so, because it's just, it's such like a unfortunate thing that we all think, many people think that's just based in, it's just not true, right? So anyway, if we take like a strengths-based approach, if we're recognizing what we do know, right, that we all come with skills, and that we could build on those skills that we already have, and this trauma-informed practice means practicing having money in ways that are safe and puts one in places of control. And again, this pushes back against this idea of money as a proxy, right? If money is a proxy for our safety and security, then practicing having money in ways that feel safe is a way of kind of like taking the fangs out of the proxy. So I thought of a couple examples of some trauma-informed practices, right? And that could look like just honoring saving or spending as a survival tactic, kind of speaking back to this idea of when people experience scarcity and then like are really, really intense savers or really intense spenders kind of after that. Right? But instead of like You know, like that's looking at the experience. The trauma-informed practice could be like, okay, I'm going to honor that saving or spending is a survival tactic that I've used, or it's come out of an experience. Another one is practicing giving away money, but not all the money. For some people, like some of their responses to their economic situation is to just like give and give and give, right? Spend money on other people, donate, and not end up with enough for themselves, right? So a trauma-informed practice might look like practicing giving away some money, but really intentionally not everything, right? Another trauma-informed practice could be opening an account that's only in your name, right? For people who have only had shared accounts in their lives, right? Or another one might be building wealth when you've only experienced scarcity, right? Just to like let it be true that the proxy does not have to be the only thing. So I'm going to pause there because I know that was a lot of information, but I've really been trying to think through these ideas. I'm curious what you all think, what you think I got wrong, and what you want to know more about. I put a couple questions up here on the slides to kind of spark a conversation.